Okay, I think this is going just fine. I think I'm gonna spend a little bit of time working on phaser, seeing what can be done here. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I think I'm gonna go ahead and do the getting started. If you want to know what I'm doing, go to phaser.io, phaser.io. Okay. What I'm going to be doing is I'm basically going to be going through this tutorial. I think it's this one, making your first game. Um, you can read through it. I'm going to go over this a little bit, what you need to get started on Phaser. Here you can see it shows us how to load assets and how to display images, and we're going to go through it. It's going to teach us a little bit about world building, some platforms, and you'll see that we continue on and we'll, let's see, add a sprite, we'll add a character and some physics. However, I'm going to be doing this with my own graphics. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be mostly just getting using their code that is provided, and instead of using their assets, I will be using my own assets. I don't think I'll get too far. We'll see how far we get. I don't think I have colliders yet. Or actually, the colliders I'll be able to set. Let me see. Well, we'll see how far I get. I'm not going to do too much tonight. I'm just getting started and checking out how this all works. So let's go to, again, if you want to follow along, you can go to phaser.io. You go to learn and getting started with Phaser, the getting started tutorial, and then I'm going down to the learn. And you may need to, if you're not familiar, you're gonna want to go through setting up your own dev environment. I'm already pretty seasoned at developing, so I'm not gonna go through any of that. I will be using Phaser. I mean, I will be using PHP Storm code. So let me see. And what we're going to be doing here, you can see I have some assets, some images. Just some images that I have here that I'm going to be using instead. But let's get back to what we're doing here. So let's get back to making your first game. Okay. So if you don't know what Phaser is, let's go over this. Phaser is going to be it's a JavaScript library that you can use to make video games. Here goes. It's an HTML game framework to for developers to make powerful cross-behavior HTML5 games really quickly. Um, you do need to get there. You know, you need to download a zip file. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be including it in a CDN, and we're just going to put this in an HTML file, and we'll see what we need for the JavaScript. This is the code that we need to get this going. You need to make the game file, the game variable, and the scenes that you load need to have a preload, create, and an update function. So basically, you run the game and you start a scene. Here you can see the config for the game that we're going to be creating. Phaser.game config. Here's the config file, or at least the config variable, and you can see that it includes this scene that includes a preload, create, update, and this is going to be your JavaScript file. So basically, we're going to go ahead and get started from scratch, and that's what I'm going to do. So let's get to coding this. Now, coding it, let me go ahead and get rid of all these. And I'm just gonna go ahead and we'll see that right now I have one folder in my project here called assets. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna go ahead and add a new, let's add an HTML file. We'll call it index.html. So we're gonna call this a phaser game. And let me see if I can make this bigger just in case. Bigger. Can I make this bigger? I'm not sure. View. Appearance. Let's go to zoom. Right. 125. Let's go to 125. It's a little bit better. Cool. I think that's a little bit better. Maybe a little bit more. I could go a little bit. No, that should be fine. I think that's good. That's kind of big enough for me. That's too big for me. So hopefully that registers on screen. So when I start this, I'm gonna need an edit configuration. This is so I can run this as my server, and I'm gonna do this as a PHP built-in web server. So we're gonna apply this, okay, and I'm gonna run it, and we're gonna see that I'm running it, and here you can see what it looks like. So I'm gonna inspect it to see the console. I don't really see anything going on here. But this is running our server right now. So let me go back to the actual code here. And I'm going to just kind of lower that out of the way. And just to show you what's going on, we're just going to go ahead and add a heading here. Hello world. And we'll go to the browser view and let's read. There you go. Now it says hello world. You can see we're getting started on our development. Everything is going as expected. So let's get back to it. Now, what we're going to do here to get this started is let's go ahead and read a little bit about what's going on in Phaser. So what you're going to need to do is download it. So let me go to where can we get it? Download Phaser. So we're back at the website where you click on download Phaser. You can download it right here. You can install it using npm or node, but I'm gonna use the CDN. I'm not gonna use the minified. I'm gonna go ahead and use the unminified for right now. Let's see which one is better. I guess it doesn't really matter. It's either one of these. So what you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to do a. Do we do it as a link or do we do it as a source? Let me see. I think we do it as a link. No, we do it as a source. You do it as a script call. In fact, let's see. I was hoping for just a whole version. I think we do it as a script here. Let me take a look. Take a look at the sources so we can see what's going on here. You can see we don't got anything going on. So let me go to Phaser and PHP. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the head and we're just gonna do a script call. It's a script and we need a source. And the source is that CDN, and you can see that we've linked it. Now we've got it. And if I go back to the browser, let's refresh the browser. And if we go here, we can go see our CDN. we could see that phaser is now included in our sources. We have a copy of it right here. And so it's a big long file. Obviously, that's the big old library. Take a look at the network. Take a look at there. There it is. It's included. We got it from that CDN. There you go. Now we have Phaser technically downloaded and installed to our website. So let's go back. That's the CDN. What we need to do next, if we remember, let's go to the getting started tutorial over here. Back to the making your first game. So we need to get this in a JavaScript. So you want to do it in the body. I'm not entirely sure if it tells you right here. Let me see. It doesn't really tell me. No. If you actually download their files, you can see what it looks like. But we're going to go ahead and start kind of primitive, and then we'll just clean it up later on. So by primitive, what I mean is I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. We're going to take it to our file, and under here, I just have H. Let's see. Under here, we're going to go ahead and put script. And this script is where we're going to go ahead and put the script we just copied. And we'll see that we have the config. It's going to be preload. There's nothing really happening. There's nothing in the preload. There's nothing in the create. There's nothing in the update right now. So all that's happening is that we're going to run this script in the body here, just above the end of the body. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start working on it from there. So again, let me go ahead and go back to the browser. And at the browser, we'll refresh this. It tells me no internet. Okay, I do have this problem with the server every now. Let me see. Go back over here. Start this, refresh. There you go. So now you can see that what we've actually done here, if we go back to our code is now, just make sure this is working. Our code now is running a game. There's nothing going on, but you can see that there is a game. So you can see right here, again, if we inspect this, I'm inspecting this over here, and you can see that it's telling us that Phaser is loaded. There's nothing going on here. It's just a black screen. It's the canvas, the JavaScript canvas. So let's go ahead and continue forward. So now what we're going to do is, and it gives you some information here if you want to read through this. You got your local variable called game, and the configuration object is passed to it. And you can look at the code. You can actually look at the API to get more information about this. For example, you can see that the config variable, the config object right here, it has a type, a width, a height, and a scene. However, let's go ahead and take a look here. Here's the API documentation. Let's get to the API documentation. Let's go ahead and look what this is. You see this phaser game, phaser.game. So let's go ahead and do phaser.game. And we can see, let's see, I wonder if there's the config. Where do we see the config? Phaser.game. It is the object here, it's the class. You can see new game, game config, which is exactly what this code looks like. New phaser.game config. And you can see here's the game config type. And if we click on that, you can find the properties that are available for this. So for example, you've got width, height, you can do a zoom, type, stable short. You can do a parent, canvas, custom environment. Here's the scene that we saw. You need to add a scene to it. There's all sorts of other things, a version, a URL, autofocus, banners, frames per second right here, the FPS. You can see that they're all optional. Everything here is optional. Down this column right here, down the arguments. So here's your name, your type, your arguments, the default, and the description of what all is available in your game config. As you can see, I'm scrolling down and there's quite a bit of settings there, configuration settings. But of course, we're just starting off with the type, which the type is going to be phaser auto. Let's go ahead and take a look. Type right here, number, constant. The default is constant auto. Which renderer to use? We're going to use phaser auto. That's where phaser auto comes from. This is a variable right here. It's an enum phaser.auto, phaser.canvas, phaser.headless, phaser.webgl, otherwise canvas. So we're just going to use phaser.auto is the best one to use in this case. So that's what we're going to use, phaser auto. We have a height of 800. A width of 800, a height of 600, and that's what you get right here. This is 800 by 600. You can probably even verify that by, there's the canvas. Yeah, 8 by 600. So we got 8 by 600. And that's what we're going to go with for right now. Then the scene, you need a scene. And again, if you go down to scene, you need a phaser scene type right here. So again, we can take a look at the phaser scene type. Phaser scene. So here's your phaser scene. And you need let's see, the scene. Oh, look, I'm not sure what I'm looking at right now. We're going to see that it has members, add, ins, cache, and we're going to work with these variable or these members later in these methods. So let's take a look what we're going to be doing with that. But at the moment, let's go ahead and push forward in this. So now we're going to see that we can load assets. So that's what we're going to start next. And you can see that what it's doing is the preload is saying basically this dot load image, this dot load image, this dot load image. And there's also a this dot load sprite sheet where they've got their dude. And then they've got what they're doing right here is this dot load image. So right here, we are in the scene. So we've got a scene object. And that's what we're messing with here. So in the API, I'm in the phaser scene, and we're gonna, this is the this, and so this dot load is this right here. This dot load, and you've got it's the scene loader plugin. This property will only be available if defined in the scene injection map and the plugin is installed. So basically, these are what we're loading. So when you click on this, you'll find that there's members, base URL, let's see, methods, and that's where we're really going to be looking at methods. So for example, this is using this dot load image and this dot load sprite sheet. So if we go back to this API, we're going to see that we're in the loader. That's what the this dot load is. So this dot load, and it's got methods, and we're going to be using image, and we're also going to be using sprite sheet. So image and sprite sheet, which are methods here, you can take a look at. These are methods on the loader, the phaser.loader plugin. So we're going to start with, let's just go to image for right now, because that's going to be the first methods. This dot image, you're going to see that it uses a key and a URL, and then you've got some settings if you need to add some settings past that. In general, we're seeing that, let's see. In general, we're seeing that you're going to need a key, which is that first, is the first, let's see, there it goes. That's going to be your first string right there is your key. Then your second string is going to be your URL. So that's going to be just your URL to that. So, all right. So now that's what you're seeing. This .load.image, you're giving it a key of sky. So you're going to, this is how they're loading. And again, this is in the preload function. So it's loading an image for sky, for ground, for star, and for bombs. Okay, we're not going to necessarily, these are, first you got to load them. And then once you load it, you add it. So again, right here, you load. Remember, we're in the loader. Let me go back some. We're in the loader. So now we go back to the scene. The scene had load as one of its members. But then afterwards, after you, once we go into, you're going to add the image, and we're going to add the image in the create. So we're going to see the load, and then we're going to look at the add to add it to the actual scene. And again, in add, you add the phaser game objects. And here we're going to find a different set of objects. So we loaded images. We're going to load images, and then we're going to add, and here's the add. So we're going to go ahead and add images just like we can to sprites, which is what we'll do with the sprite sheet. So we're going to add an image and a sprite. So let's go back to this is the add image, which is going to be pretty much the same thing. When you add the image, there's going to be an X and a Y and a texture and potentially a frame, optionally a frame. And we see that coming up. So in this part 2, loading the assets, and then you're going to display the images that, which is the assets that you load. So let's go ahead, and that's the part we're going to get to next. Let me see what's going on here. So you can see they load their sky, their ground, the star, and the bomb. And here they got a picture of just the sky. In my case, let's go ahead and copy this. We can just copy this. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this inner part. And then I'm going to alter it to fit my needs. So let's go to the code. And you can see we've got our preload function right here. And our preload function is, we're going to go ahead and copy this. This is where we're preloading. And let's go ahead and stay with sky. But instead of assets.sky, I've got my assets. I'm going to do assets, images, dot, and let's go with digital skyline, JPEG. I've got a JPEG. So we'll go with digital skyline, JPEG in this case. And I'll also go ahead and for the ground, we'll do platform 1. So we'll get rid of this, and we'll do the same thing, images dot platform underscore 1 dot png, which is one of my images over here. Then they've got a star. Let's go with this Zap Crystal. No, not the Zap Crystal. Zap Crystal's kind of a big. Actually, I think they do use it. Let me see. No, that's a sprite sheet. So technically, this is a sprite sheet. As you can tell, it's multiple pictures. Whereas this is also sprite sheet. Whereas you can see platform is not. This is a sprite sheet. So right now, we're going to go ahead and just get rid of all these. Right now, we're going to go ahead and stay away from star and bomb because the ones that I have are actually sprite sheets. They have other ones where they're single object or single images, like sky, for example. My digital skyline, if you can see, is one. It's not a sprite sheet, it's just a picture, as well as the platform 1. It's just a picture. It's not a sprite sheet. And a sprite sheet, for example, here's my spaghetti monster. It's got 4 images side by side. It'll actually be an animation. Just like, for example, the Zap Crystal, there's an animation here. This one also has an animation to it. This is an animation. So these animations that I'm calling them, these are sprite sheets, and a sprite sheet has several pictures of the sprite guy. You get what I'm saying? We'll use this guy as our dude in this sprite sheet right here as our dude. So I'm gonna go ahead and comment out the bomb and the star because I'm gonna be using sprite sheets in the future for them. But here is our example of the sprite sheet. So we're adding this .load.sprite sheet, and if we go back to the API, let's go back to the API. Remember, we're going to this .load.sprite sheet. So let's go back. We are at the, let's go to the load. The loader, and the loader can load sprite sheets. So here's our method, load sprite sheet. So this .load.sprite sheet needs a key and the URL, and then you can also do some frame config and some cross HR settings, as you can see. You can take a look at this if you want, but here you can see you use this in the preload function. Whenever you're loading, you're going to be loading mostly in the preload. So we're going to load sprite sheet. Here's your key tag. Here's your URL. And then here also your frame width and your frame height. So you can see that over here it does the same thing. It calls it a dude. Here's the URL, which is where it is in the directory. And then they use the frame width and frame height, which they have a 32 by 48. We're gonna use a different one here, 32 by 38. I'm pretty sure ours is 32 by 32. I think it's gonna be 32 by 32. We'll make sure just in case. So you can see this is how it even kind of gives you. You can use a frame config so that you can actually tell it what its start frame and end frame is, so that you can actually load only parts of it if you don't want to load the whole thing. But generally, all we're going to get started with is the frame width and the frame height as per the original, tutorial. So that's what we're doing now. Load sprite sheet. We're going to go ahead and keep ours called dude, but it isn't dude.png in the assets folder. Ours is in the assets.images. And we're going to go ahead and I think ours is Zapper Zach Sprite 1.png. And it's got 32 by, ours is not 48. I think ours is 32 by 32. Let me see. I can take a look just to be sure. That looks like 32. Yeah, it's 336 by 48. Actually, it's 48 by 48 because let me see. This is let me get back to this. I'm not showing the screen. That's the right screen. Here's the screen I'm using. Here's the character I'm using. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 336 by 48. So I think this is actually a 48 by 48 character. So 336 divided by 7 is 48. So yes. If we get back to what I was doing, you can see I have the sprite sheet. Here's the dude. I've updated his URL because you can see in my assets, in my images, I'm going to use this sprite sheet right here. Let me go ahead and clear out of this. So again, it is, you can take a look at it right here. It says it's 336 by 48. So I thought it was 32 by 32, but it's actually 48 by 48. So now you can see that I've loaded the sky and the ground and the dude. I've loaded 2 images and a sprite sheet, and I've commented these 2 out, so we're not going to use them. So again, we've just loaded them in the preload function, but we don't create them and we haven't updated them. So now let's go ahead and take a look in our phaser game. You can see It's still starting. It's still just a black screen. If we go to our network though, let's take a look. You can see that at this point, here's our digital skyline. I'm gonna go to the preview. There's our platform. There's our Zapperzack sprites. So these are loading as expected. They're loaded, loaded, loaded. They haven't been created yet. They haven't been added to the game, but they are now loading. So let's move on. Now we're gonna actually add these. If we go back here, we've loaded the assets. You need to add them in the preload. So basically, if you understand what's going on, is that the video game is just playing a bunch of frames over and over and over again. And what it's doing over and over and over again is running the update. Let's go. Let me go back to our game. So remember, there's a preload function, there's a create, and there's an update. What we're doing is we're going to preload for the scene, and then we're going to create and add to the scene, and then this update that plays over and over and over again. And this update is like just your frames per second kind of idea where it just repeats over and over and over again. And here is where you're um, manipulating the game. This is where you're adding your game logic. So this is where, for example, if they're pressing down the left button, they go left. If they stop pressing the left button, excuse me, they just stand there. Or say they're pressing down the right button, then they're going to turn right and they're going to go right. If they go down, if they press the down button, what do they? You get what I'm saying? So this is the update is where you're actually using your logic. But again, preload and create. Preloading it is where you're loading your image, where you're loading your assets. Create is where you're actually adding them to the scene, and update is where the game logic lies. And we'll continue on, and we'll get to that eventually. But so what we need to do now is because we've loaded the sky, we've loaded the ground, we've loaded the dude. Again, I can show you that one more time, just to be sure, just to get back to where we're at. We've got the sky, the ground, the dude, and I'm looking. I'm inspecting the code here. Gone to network. If you're familiar with this, you're familiar with this. If not, this is where you want to get to be familiar with if you're a developer, because you can see just to make sure everything's working, it's working. All right, so next part is we're going to display an image. So in order to display one of the images we've loaded, we place the following code inside the create function. And you can see this is where they're doing this dot image, this dot add that image, and they're putting a number, and another string right there called sky. And that's the key that we're going to be messing with the keys. Now that we've loaded them, we can use the keys. And so this is going to add this dot add that image. And again, remember, we loaded them. Now we're in the scenes, right? We're in the scene. Oh, I messed up. Oh, let's go back. Click the wrong button. Scene type, phaser scene. So remember here we were loading, now we're adding. And so when we add, remember we go back to, we're in the documentation, this dot add, we're adding the scene. Well, we're this dot add that, here's the methods. Image, this dot add that image. So when you're adding the image, so again, this is this dot add that image, you're adding an X, a Y, and a texture, and possibly an optional frame. An optional frame from the texture this game object is rendering with. So that was when, if you had a sprite sheet, you can kind of mess with the frames here, and you can actually use one of the frames in particular. So you can actually get pretty, how do I say this, complex with these, and it helps you save data basically, or save, I'm sorry, not data, but it helps you make like smaller images so that you save space and you can have faster games when you're actually playing, like say on the internet. But anyway, Okay, sorry, taking my drink of my drink. Anyway, so that's what you're going to see. You're going to see an X, a Y, and a texture. You're not going to necessarily see a frame because the frame is optional. So this dot add dot image, that's what you're doing. You're adding 400 and 300, and you're adding the sky. And again, you can find it in their files if you download their files. So you can see that they added right here. Here's their create file, this.add.image, and they're adding the sky and the star. We did not do the star, we did the ground instead. So let's go ahead and add our image. This dot add 43 and 4300 they're using. So let's go back to our code. We're gonna go to our create this dot add dot image, and we're gonna do, let's go ahead and do 400, 300, and then we do our sky, which is our key. And then we're gonna also do this dot add dot image. Same thing, we'll just do 400, 300, but we'll do ground. So now we've created it. So let's go back to our browser and let's take a look once we refresh this. And again, we've added assets. So let me go back and restart our server. And there you can see it. I've added the background, which is the sky, and I've added the platform. And I've added at 400, 300. And remember, if you remember, it's 800 by 600. It's 800 wide by 600 high. And I did it at 400 and I did it at 300. So it's 400, which is half of 8, 300, which is half of 6. And the origins, usually they start off right at the middle. So the origin of these pictures, basically what this does is this adds this image with its origin at the X and Y. The origin being, by default, the middle of the picture. So the center of this picture and the center of this picture are both loaded at these 400 by 300 X and Y, starting obviously at the top left hand corner. So XY corner is, if you take a look at this, like I said, this starts 0, 0. If you can see it's up at the very top. This is 0, 0. So 400x, 300y is right in the middle. And again, this picture is much bigger than 800 pixels wide. But the platform is only, I'm not sure how big this platform is. I'd have to take a look. We go back to the images platform one. It's 402 pixels by 105 pixels. So 402 wide, 105 tall. But basically, that's what we've done here. Now, if we go back to our example, this example has told us how to add an image. So now we can add images. It's pretty simple. We just do the preload the image, add the image. Here it says hit. You see the hint. You can use set origin to change this. It even tells you right here the values 400 and 300 are the X and Y coordinates. Why 4 and 3? It's because in Phaser, all game objects are positioned based on their center by default. The background image is 8 by 6 in size. So if we were to display it centered at 0, 0, you'd only see the bottom right corner of it. So that's the picture that it's. They're using a different picture. I've got a much larger picture. Anyway, so you can read all that if you want. We, on the other hand, have got our pictures. So we're going to go ahead and move on. All right. So next is the world building. So what they're going to do here is you're going to see there's some platforms. We're going to go ahead and follow this. You see that for now they've got their create, and you can see that they've added some more information here. This dot add image, they added the sky, and then let's see what else they do. Okay, they add some physics to it, and then you can see right here, they add the image in the create, but then they make some platforms. And these platforms, this dot physics dot add, and they add a static group. So again, we can go through the API to read all that, but for right now, we're gonna go platforms create, and then when they're creating, there's more numbers. There's another string here, which is another key. They set the scale to 2, and they refresh the body. And then they create some more platforms create. So it's got a ground that it sets the scale to 2, and then it's got 3 more platforms. So and then right here it says, you can see that there's this dot physics. That means we're using arcade physics system. But before we add that, we need to add it to our game config to tell Phaser our game requires. So you can see that they show you another config where they actually update the physics right here. So for us, let's go ahead and just jump straight to this. I'm going to go ahead and find the physics. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my editor. And here on my editor, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. So they're talking about in this create. So we've got the ground. Let's just go ahead and go below both of these. And here's what they had. Actually, you know what? That's not where we are going to go up. They did it after the height. Let's do it after the height too. Physics. So here we've got our height. We've got 800 width, 600 height. Now we're adding this physics. You just see we added as another parameter in this object. Physics, and it has an object of default arcade, and then arcade gravity. It's got a Y300 and a debug faults. That's just what it gives us as the demonstration. Obviously, there are settings that you can go and look for that you can change as necessary. Right now, we're just being simple, and this is what we're going. Hold on just a minute. Okay, let's take a look. All right, so we've added the physics in our config file. Next thing we're gonna do is we're getting into this create, right? So platforms. Let's go ahead and just copy all of this. I'm just gonna go ahead and copy this from their code. Let's take it back to my editor, and this is going into the create. So now this, copy that. It just goes right into the create function. Platforms, this dot static group, you can see it. It creates the ground, set scale, and we've created it. It's copied it. We're using, they have different images, but we can use these images ourselves. And let's go to see what that takes a look like. And so, oh, here, make sure I show this. Yeah, I refreshed it, and you can see this is now what it looks like. Let's remove, if you want to, if we go back, this is where we added the image. Let's remove these images. Actually, let's not remove the sky, but that's why they removed the ground. Now that makes sense. We're commenting out the ground, and we're gonna go back to our, if you take a look right here, that's why they have the sky, but they've removed the ground, and instead they've done this. So that's why if we, there you go, we've removed that ground image, but we do have platforms now. You can see that we've got a game, And we've got some platforms, and it's as simple as doing this. This is just a JPEG and some PNGs and some JavaScript, which, in my opinion, actually is not very difficult. So let's continue going forward. Um, we skipped this because we already did this, and you can see their picture. They got a different sky, and they've got different platforms, but you can see they've got one, two, three platforms, and basically the ground, and you can see that the ground is double the size of the platforms. That's exactly what we got. You can see that this is a platform picture, but it's double the size of these other platform pictures. So we do have one, two, three platforms. Our platform is bigger than theirs. You can see theirs is much thinner, but our platforms are still behaving the same. So that's what I mean by we're following their example, but we're using our assets instead. So I'm using my asset instead. And so now we're moving into part 4, which is the platforms. So it even tells you we just added a bunch of code to our create function, and it's telling you about this code. It's telling you this right here. Let's go over the code. The platforms equals this dot physics dot add static group. So this creates a new static physics groups and assigns it to the local variable platforms. Let's see. So a dynamic body is one that can move around via forces such as velocity or acceleration. It can bounce and collide with other objects, and that collision is influenced by the mass and of the body and other elements. So this is what makes these games interesting, is that you can actually add physics to these guys. So for right now, we don't have nothing. I'm clicking around. You can see nothing is happening when I click around. There's no character. There's no dude. There's nobody running around. There's no physics. So that's what we're going to be doing next. And it continues on explaining how these platforms are created. Like I said, you create the platform and you set the scale and you refresh the body. So when you set the scale to 2, which is what this one is, that's what this one is. You get that picture and you can see how it's even distorted. It looks like it's not as clear. These little platforms, they're much more clear, but you can see that this platform is just a double the size of this one right here. You see, it's just zoomed in or whatever. I keep clicking on that one, but here we are, and that's what it says. As we saw previously, creates this scene, this preload, and it's talking about there it is. There's a, you're creating the different platforms. When you got physics, so this dot physics dot add dot static group. So let's go over here to, we are in the scene, right? No, this is the game object. So let's go phaser.scene. Remember, here's the phaser. This, so what does it say? This dot physics dot add. So we're in the scene, right? This is the scene. Here are the members. This dot physics. So here's our physics type, the Scene Arcade Physics plugin. So right here, then what else is it asking? Add static group. So here's its member, the Physics Arcade Physics, because that's the default one. Add, and you can see that you're adding a phaser Physics Arcade factory. We go to here, and then what's the next? Static group. So we go to methods. You can see static group over here. Creates a static physics group object. All game objects created by this group will automatically be static arcade physics objects. So just like what it was saying, there's static, and then there's in contract there's the dynamic. There's dynamic and static. So when you've got physics, you've got dynamic and static. Static is going to be like your walls, and dynamic is going to be like your characters that can move around and run into things. So that's what we're doing. And then you can see that it's got a static group returns. But what we've done is we've added a static group. It returns a static group. That's our static group platforms. And platforms lets you create. Let's go back to our static group. We go right here. Here's our type, static group. It says create. Let's go to members. To do create callback. Here it is, create. Here's your method. You got a create method. When you create, you add an X, Y, a key, a frame, visible, and if active. So in this case, those are all, as you can see, those are all optional. Everything's optional in this. But we create, that's what it's doing. Create X, Y, and then the key frame. All we're doing is X, Y, and a key. So when you add, here's here's your static group. The static group is just a static group. The static group can create, which is like adding. So what you're doing is you're adding the ground a bunch of times. Ground, 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 ground. And you can see that it even changes 600. So it's time to place the other platforms. So 600 by 400, 50 by 250, 750 by 220. And that is what you can see we did on our side. We just copied and pasted that part. And so now that's exactly what we're doing. We're adding the image, which is the sky. So we loaded the sky, we loaded the ground. We haven't yet touched this dude. But we added the sky, that's just the background. Then we added the ground, and we're making a bunch of platforms. And eventually we'll use the different program like tiled, and we'll make a map. And we'll actually get a map. Out of the map, we'll take the sprites, or we'll take the images like this. These are like tiles. We would consider these tiles. And we'll make a tile map and work with the tile map eventually. But for right now, we're doing it all programmatically. And so that's what we've done. We've got the platforms, which is just a static group, which you don't see them at first. You actually got to create this static group. And again, we're using the ground, the ground, the ground, the ground. So platforms. We didn't tell it what key to use, but now we're creating the ground, and we're just making it station. We're making it, remember, we're static. It's not dynamic, it's static. And that's what shows us at the end when we come back to this. We have, here you go. Bam, bam, bam. All right. Next up, and we're probably going to finish this. I'm probably going to finish this one because it's been about an hour that I'm working on this. So I'm really just going to stop about here for right now because I am getting into this and I just kind of want to show this off, and I'll finish the rest of this later. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and Ready Player One is what this calls. And you're going to see that there's an animation. There's an animation. And we're going to go ahead and get started on animations. So we've got the player, which was, remember, the dude. It's the dude. You can see that this is in, now we're back to the, what is this? The create. So here you're going to see where they create the player. This .physics.add sprite. Instead of adding a static group, if you remember, we added a static group, physics.add.static group. We're going to add a sprite. Now, a sprite is a character. A sprite is, an NPC of some sort. It's just the sprite is a character in the game. So we're going to use our dude, and then you can see that they set a bounce to him. They set a collider world bounds. So you see they create the player, and then they set bounce, set collider world bounce on him, and then we see some animations. Okay, and then they're gonna move on to the physics sprite. So where they're gonna here's the physics that sprite is that same code right here up to, but they're gonna also here's his set bounce. They're explaining what they're doing. So there's his set bounce, and then his animations, the animations. So let's go ahead and just straight up copy and paste this. I'm just gonna copy because I'm also using dude. So I'm gonna copy him and let's paste it right into our code. So let's go back to this guy. This and we're doing platforms. And let's go ahead and copy and paste it. There, I just copied it and pasted. So we've got our platforms. I'm going to go ahead and consolidate this a little bit. Platforms, platforms, platforms. Now let's consolidate the player. And then I'm going to consolidate the animations. Animation. So I want to go ahead and just to get this going, let's just show what this does. And let me go back over here. Let's refresh this page. And you can see we have a character now. He doesn't really do anything. I'm pressing buttons and he does not do anything. But if I refresh it, you can see him fall. You see he falls from a certain amount. He's not really falling far enough. According to I've got bigger platforms. So let me go ahead and change the values. So let's go back to our code and you can see that where does it start? Player. He starts him at 150, 100 by 450. So 100 is the X, which seems good to me. 450 seems kind of low. Remember, it's only 600. Let's go with 300. So that way we're half and half. And let's go ahead and start with that. Go back to our screen. Let's reset him. See how he jumps, he falls from higher. Reset. Oh, he's much higher now. Fall. And so now we're supposed to get him to where he selects world collide. Why is he not colliding? That makes some interesting concept here. Now let's go back. He's actually supposed to be colliding. Set collide world bounce. Set bounce 02. Did we forget something here? Let me take a look. He's refreshed and he should be bouncing off of the ground now. So I must have missed something. Because this player set collide world bounds is true. So let's go back. Did I miss something here? Let's see. I think he's already supposed to be falling into the ground. Let's take a look. They have him. Oh, here they have him. Here they have it. Okay, I'm looking. He's in the next step where they're going to put him in the world of physics. You can see they have the same problem in the next step. Part 6. We are in part 5. But this is where I'm going to end it right now. So in part 6, we'll get to that and we will fix that particular problem. So as of right now, you can see where we are at. Our character is now, when I refresh it, he's falling. He's just hitting the end of the world. He's not landing or hitting the platforms just yet. So we don't have the physics working just yet. You can see I'm refreshing the page, and there is our guy. We don't have controls on him. We don't have nothing going for him, but we have built up to part 5, Ready Player One of our making your first Phaser 3D game with our own assets. So we did add the sprite. Here's our character. We gave him a bounce. Set collider world bounce. So let's take a look at that. What I'm gonna do, for example, just to mess with it, just to see what happens, is this right here. I'm gonna set that. I'm gonna comment that out. That's the set collide world bounce. So now, if we refresh the page, he should not. He shouldn't hit the world bounce. So now, oh, look at him. He just keeps falling. You see how he keeps just falling? He's off the map. He's off the map. He's not even hitting the world anymore. So that's the world bounds right there. So you see that that's some of the options that are available on these physics. So let's go back. Player. Remember the player is this. Oh, well, let me show you this. We're in the code here. So I went ahead and that was what I commented that line out, and let's uncomment it. So now he would collide with the world bound. So remember the player is this.physics.add.sprite. We added the sprite as a dude because remember we loaded the dude as a sprite sheet earlier. So while we can add an image of the sky, you see, and then the image of the ground we did not add as an image. We added it as a static group. And that's so we have that image loaded. You see how we have the ground image loaded? We had added the ground as an image, like for example, the sky. We added the sky as an image, but a sprite can move across the screen much easier. A sprite can have physics added to it. So the sprite that's where we come across the dude. But at the same time, the image can be used in the physics as a static group, and that's what we did right here. We created a bunch of platforms. We used that image that we loaded, which we had not added, like we added the sky. Now we add the ground, but the ground is added as a static group, which has physics attached to it, and a static group is like a wall that doesn't move. And here we have a player where we've added as a sprite, and instead of it as a static group, it is dynamic. And we are going to add movement to him. In the meantime, we've added a bounce and we've added a collide with the world bounce. So, for example, let's go ahead and take a look at this. We'll see what his bounce looks like. You can see how he bounces there. Let's see. When he lands, bounce, a little bounce. Let's go ahead and add more to his bounce. Look at set bounce. Instead of 0.02, let's set it to 5. And that's where you can see over here. What I've done is instead of it being at 0.3, I've set it to 5. Let's go back. And when we bounce him now, bam, look at that. He's bouncing way off the screen. Look at that. That's a huge bounce. 5 is the big bounce. You can see it's causing havoc. So let's go back to our code. And instead of 5, let's just go ahead and set 1. I set 1. Let's go back to our game. You can see 5, 1. He jumps pretty high. He's bouncing pretty high. That's a pretty good 1. Look at what 1 looks like. You can see he's got a good bounce to him. And of course, that comes from the set bounce, set collide world bounds. We showed that. I showed that earlier. True. If I said it, like he just keeps falling through the world. Now the animations we don't have yet. Now I've created them, but we're not playing them, and that is what we'll go into the next. When we move forward into this, we'll see how to go ahead and add the animation. But I will go ahead and end this for right now. This has just been a test. This is just getting started with Phaser.